Believe me, I totally get it. There are a lot of reasons to really wish that Lindsay Clancy was not the one that killed her kids, and a lot of reasons to really dislike and be angry at her less than stellar husband, Patrick Clancy. But that does not a murderer make. So we are going to go through all of the evidence that you've shared with me pointing to Patrick Clancy as the potential murder suspect, point by point, and talk about them. Okay, point number one I've seen is that her body temperature was 82 degrees. So low that it would have been impossible for her body temperature to reach that low in the time that he was gone. Therefore, he would have had to have been the one to kill the kids and to almost kill her and leave her out in the snow before he left, so that there was ample time for her body temperature to reach that low. No, let me tell you why. First off, we know definitively that he is not the one that did that to Lindsay, okay? Because we have both of their Apple data, their phone data, and it shows that there was movement on Lindsay's phone on her watch at her house after his data shows him having left, okay? She was up and moving while he was gone. Secondly, the point about it being impossible for her body to have reached that temperature, that's just not true. There are medications that can cause body temperature dysregulation, okay? Meaning you can reach temperatures much quicker, much slower. It can make your body temperature abnormal. Secondly, she had lost a lot of blood prior to going out the window, okay? And blood heats your body. She had lost that heating source. Finally, she was laying on a blanket of snow. I think you will be hard-pressed to find a legitimate doctor that will tell you it is impossible, given all the circumstances, for Lindsay to have reached that body temperature. Once you do find that doctor, please come back and we'll have a conversation. Point number two is that Patrick Clancy had lied on the stand during his testimony when he said that after finding his wife, she told him that she had tried to kill herself and that the kids were in the basement. People are saying that that's a lie because it would be impossible for Lindsay to speak because of the injury to her neck. However, Sue O'Connell has been reporting from inside the courtroom, and she heard the 911 call. And she says that in the 911 call, you can hear Lindsay. And while she's not speaking in full sentences, she did communicate to Patrick what happened, and she did communicate to Patrick where the kids were. This one's super short. I heard someone say that there was nobody else that Lindsay Clancy had told that she had thoughts of harming the kids. We just heard testimony today from Lindsay's mom that she had told her she'd had thoughts of harming the kids. So it's just not true. I don't even know where that came from. Okay, the DNA. I have heard some people say that it was clearly Patrick that did it because it was his DNA that was on the bands, the exercise bands. He is the one that found his children and removed the exercise bands from their necks. So clearly his DNA would be on the exercise bands. And the fact that there was more of his DNA than Lindsay's DNA, or the fact that her DNA did not show up on some of them, it's negligible, frankly. It just means that there wasn't enough for them to get a clear reading of her DNA. You have to remember that they all have similar DNA because they're all in the same family, so hers would have been hard to distinguish from her children who share her DNA. So it doesn't mean that she wasn't touching those bands. And of course, let's talk about the Google searches, okay? One of them was how to disable the airbags in a Kia Sorento, and some of you have said that was probably Patrick. There's actually more evidence that that was probably Lindsay. Why? Because after that Google search, she told her mom that she didn't want to be left alone in the car. She didn't want to drive. so she stopped driving and her mom would drive her to pick up the kids. There's an obvious connection there. And a big one I've seen from a lot of you is that no nurse would ever have to search for the carotid artery. But you cannot possibly be so presumptuous to say that every single nurse and every single function across all of the world knows exactly where, how, and how deep to puncture the carotid artery in order to bleed out to kill themselves. So the last theory you might try to tell me is that he killed the kids before he left and that Lindsay killed herself while he was gone, right? Because remember the Apple data? In order for that to be true, you would have to believe that he was sure Lindsay would kill herself while he was gone. How would that be the case? Did he know hypnotherapy? Was that call to her from CVS him hypnotizing her and putting her in a trance? Because I would have a really hard time believing that. And I know it's hard, but sometimes the simplest answer, even when it's tough to stomach, is the right answer. And in this case, Lindsay killed her kids while she was in a really bad mental state, and it's a tragedy.